This conference will now be recorded.
Well, Bishop, if we can turn to you for your opening prayer, please.
Thank you very much, Alec, and thank you, everyone. And Happy New Year to everybody, and blessings of this wonderful Epiphany season. Even in the midst of everything that's going on around us, we celebrate the joy of this season, which was all about light and hope and revelation and learning more about who this tiny baby that was born in Bethlehem is to us, and that is always a time of rejoicing. So great to have you all on the call today, and let us begin with a word of prayer. Gracious and loving God, we give you praise and thanksgiving for the gift of this beautiful day and everything that is a part of it. Especially in the glory of this Epiphany season, we give you thanks for the light that you shine in our lives. We give you thanks for the gift of your Son, Jesus Christ. And as over this season in the church year, we learn more about the incarnation, the Word made flesh in the world and dwelling among us. We give thanks that we have been called together in the unity of his body, the church, and the world. We give thanks for the mission and ministry that you entrust to us, and that you are indeed present with us in all times and circumstances, in times of hope and joy, but also in times of challenge and difficulty. As we gather to discuss affairs within the life of this Southern Vineyard, which we have been called the Diocese of Ontario, we pray that you will be especially present with us by the power of that Spirit. We pray especially for the world in which we live, and we pray for those on the front line, especially in the healthcare sector, as we continue to deal with COVID-19. We pray for our leaders at the federal, provincial, and municipal levels, and for the challenges and the decisions that they must take over these days. Strengthen us and help us to be willing and helpful partners together with those among whom we serve in our communities. In Jesus' holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much, everyone. Again, great to have you here today. As I move into my opening remarks, I just want to take a moment. On the agenda today, we're going to have some of our usual presentations that we have around zoos and all those sorts of things. But of course, with the shutdown and the stay-at-home order that went into effect as of today, we'll have a few things to talk about there, and that will be of import to you. And but just I want to extend welcome to Sophie Koala, who is with us here today. I'm downstairs in my haunt down in the basement. Sophie's up at the dining room table, but she also has taken on, and I'm so pleased, the work of coordinating Primates World Relief and Development Funds. We're going to take a few minutes just after my update to talk, so Sophie can talk a little bit about herself, to introduce herself to you and talk a little bit about her hopes and dreams for PWRDF in the Diocese of Ontario, something that's very near and dear to my heart. You may remember a few years ago, committed a bishop's dinner to that work, and we had the 3 cantors here, and that was a wonderful time and celebration, but opportunities to support the work of PWRDF, especially in these days, which are so challenging, both at home and the work that PWRDF does here, but around the world. So thanks, Sophie, for taking that on. Look forward to hearing from you. As I always do at the beginning of these calls, and hopefully we'll continue to do, I think, Alec, as you pointed out, our 26th call that we've been on, and you're using the first lines of the first verses of the particular psalm of the same number, and I thought that was particularly appropriate for us today to talk about that line, my hope is in the Lord, therefore I will not fall. And that's where our hope always is. And one of the things that gives me great confidence in that is that working with all of you folks, as you continue to do the work that you do within your parishes and within your communities. These, we're 10 months into this pandemic, and we have, as you know, I don't need to go into detail around the challenges that are facing us now, but you continue to carry forward the mission of Jesus Christ, committed to you in your parishes and working together with your brothers and sisters in Christ. And I continue to be so appreciative and blown away by everything that you continue to do. And the challenges are getting hard, but I remember once, many years ago, I was serving a church in central New Brunswick, and there was a reader from the Church of Scotland who came and delivered a sermon. And I remember him talking about being in the Blitz and the having to have the no lights on policy. And he talked about the fact that just before the dawn was always the darkest time, and it was always the most challenging time in those wee hours of the morning moving through. So, you know, I'll never forget that Scottish brogue, and he said, you cannot hold back the dawn. You cannot hold back the dawn. The dawn will come. And even though it's darkest before the dawn will break upon us. And that sermon from 35 years ago has always stuck with me, and I think particularly appropriate. And I draw from those words. And you are the folks that are doing this work through these challenging days, and I want to thank you so very much. Just also in terms of my opening remarks, I want to touch on two things that I've received some correspondence about. Happy to take questions and answers at the end of the meeting in our Q&A session about it, but I just wanted to talk a little bit with you regarding that correspondence and the questions that I received. As you know, back in mid-December, the province made the decision, the civil province made the decision to go back into lockdown again. And there was much difficulty around how that was going to work. And the decision was taken that the civil province would move into lockdown as of the 26th of December. I know when that decision was made, it was about 5 days before the civil province went into lockdown, and we had to then make decisions as to what we were going to do in the diocese. And I made the decision that we would lock down as of the 24th, as of Christmas Eve. I know how disappointing and how difficult that was for everyone. I think Christmas, more so than Easter, was a particularly difficult time for everyone because of the, you know, what that means, the traditions that are around that, the inability for us to gather, the inability for families to gather. Everything's so different, and the hope was that even in some small way we could do that. That part of that decision making that I took was based on the fact that my belief is, and I've said this to a number of people, I would not want to be in the position that our municipal leaders and our provincial leaders and our federal leaders find themselves in now. They have to balance so many competing interests through this, and I would not want to be around those tables having to deal with those challenges. One of the things that for me in terms of the decision that I had to take was that I took very much to heart the words that were spoken about, that we were, I think the quote was, staring down the barrel of a lockdown, and that these you know, what was going to happen over this time if we did not continue to physically separate. We have been very fortunate in Eastern Ontario and continue to be fortunate in spite of the spiking of the numbers across the province of Ontario. We still continue to do very well. And even though our numbers in the second wave are more challenging than in the first wave, we do well. I chalk that up to the fact that my belief is, and I see it when I'm out and around in the community, that people do take this seriously. They take it seriously when they're in stores. They take it seriously when they're within the community, within their homes. We have been encouraged and urged through this time to do that. And I think too, we deal in a part of the province that has a lot of risk factors involved. But one of the things that in balancing my decision was that I believe that the province has to balance economic considerations and they have to balance health considerations. And in doing that, I believe, that's my belief, came up with a decision to move on the 26th. My consideration basically is around the public health issues and everything that I've heard about this. The speed with which COVID-19, even in a situation where you're doing well, can very quickly get out of control. And I had received a number of calls from people leading up to that decision, concern around, you know, what happens. There'll be a lot of movement in the province. People are going to be coming home in spite of all of that sort of thing. So that there were those challenges. As a result of that, I took the decision to move on the 24th. And as difficult as that decision was for everybody, my concern continues to be throughout this, and the caution that I want to bring to it, concern around the health and safety of the vulnerable population, and indeed all of us, because we're finding now that with COVID-19, you're seeing in the figures that are coming out now in early January, and as you know, these things have about a 2 to 3 week lag time in terms of how that plays out. We're beginning to see a lot of people in the younger demographic that are not only contracting COVID, but are becoming quite ill and hospitalized as a result of it. So we continue to move through these challenging times. So I understand the angst around all of that, but it's a decision that I took based on that belief that I had around the importance of making sure we exercise abundance of caution in all that we do in that. The second issue that I wanted to address was, and I've received a number of communications on it, related to the e-news article regarding the service that was held in the parish of Tynedega. I want to flesh that out a little bit more. I think the parish did exactly what they should do, and they had a question for me, and in all of these, and you will see later on when we're doing the presentation today, that if you have any questions, the best thing to do is to contact me, lay the case before me, and then we can work together about how to move forward. It's not a precise science, this, and trying to figure out how to move through this, but in terms of that service, the parish did exactly the right thing. They called me. They laid out a situation. They had not been able to reopen even when they were in a position of being the possibility of reopening in September due to the inability of doing proper physical distancing within their facility. And what they did was something I thought was quite creative, that they had acquired an FM system so that they could broadcast. And if you know the church there at All Saints in Tynedega, they have the parking is along the street, where they could broadcast to the street and people could be in their cars and could hear the service broadcast. And so they laid out that they were wondering if that could be possible for them to do on the 27th, that the clergy would be on the front steps of the church. They would conduct the service from there. People would be in their cars listening on their radios to the FM broadcast of the service, and that's what they did. I popped in for a bit for that service to watch it, and I enjoyed when they came up to the piece and they shared the piece and everybody honked their car horns. So that was the decision that I took around that. I know that the article didn't give a fulsome telling of that, and I had a number of calls and emails regarding that, and I just wanted to fill out the context of that. The important thing in all of these is if you're uncertain about something that you want to do or undertake, it's always a good idea to call, and then we can work this out, get the advice that we need to have, and then move forward with the proper permissions about that. So I was confident about the decision that I took in that moment, and just wanted to flesh out a few more of those details for you as well. And of course, I'm very happy to take questions at the end in Q&A. If you have any further questions or thoughts about that, always happy to hear that. So that's basically all that I have to share with you in terms of my opening remarks. And what I would like to do now is turn it over to Sophie for a bit, and she's going to talk a little bit to us about her hopes and dreams for PWRDF and plans moving forward there. So Sophie, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to all of you for giving me a few minutes of your time. I know you probably have an awful lot to discuss today, so I will try to be brief. I do want to acknowledge each and every one of you for the work that you've done in the past, and the work that, of course, I hope you'll do in the future together with me in this exciting new role. Recently, we sent out a letter to all the parishes and clergy to invite them to participate in a doodle poll to choose a date when we could get together by Zoom to have a discussion around each of your parishes. I'm interested in learning about what you have been doing, what your knowledge base is, where you would like to go with PWRDF, and where you think we find some opportunities to work together in the future. Some of you on the screen right now might have received that letter. Some of you may not have, but I'd like to just read one small section of it, and then I'll move into some more of the information about the actual fund. The letter was introductory about me and my past experience and what I bring to this role. I won't belabor that point in case many of you have already read it. It is on the website for the diocese as well, I believe, so you can have a look there as well. Anyway, the good thing about this moment in time is the sense of energy and excitement that comes with the dawning of a new year. As followers of Jesus, we are already focused on supporting parishioners and extending outreach to those who are not doing well. Human beings are at their best and most fulfilled when they feel needed and can be of service to others. This is the true meaning of mission in action, something I don't need to explain to you. Living the Great Commandment. Supporting PWRDF provides a magnificent opportunity to engage and activate the spirit of mission in action in our parishioners. We can be seed planters for those who desire to make a difference in the lives of others. And one of my favorite sayings is, of course, be the change that you would like to see in the world. And our work together through PWRDF gives us the opportunity to encourage others to do the same thing. So I've been busy since I was taken on in this role, and I'm learning a lot about the fund. I'm very impressed with the work that has been done already. Lynn and I were chatting in the beginning of this call, and Mitchell, about the fund and some of the, the very good regard that the fund is viewed upon by leaders in the nonprofit community, especially. They were classified as one of the top 100 best charities by Maclean magazine, and after I've looked into it, and I truly do, I'm so on board with this mission. I'm so happy to have this opportunity. We work together with Global Affairs Canada, and together with support from parishioners, other organizations, we are able to extend outreach as well beyond the church community. And I think that there's a great opportunity here to extend outreach to others in this way. And by doing that, to bring more, excuse the expression, but more bottoms in seats. I know you've all heard that expression before. So, the work of the PWRDF and the challenges that people are facing, the vulnerable sector is facing in all different parts of the world has of course really increased since COVID-19 has hit. And I'm happy to say that one of the funds, I think it's Mothers and, sorry, I'm just learning about it myself, Mothers and Babies Fund has been, that fund was over a 4-year time frame. The fund itself is now closed, but because of COVID-19, there has been an extension that has been given, and Global Affairs Canada is supporting any contributions to that fund by 6-to-1. So there's a great opportunity at this time to maximize on that benefit. It's the Maternal, Newborn, and Child Health program, and it supports children under the age of 5. So during this time period, we really do have an opportunity to make a difference in the next generation coming forward. As many of you know, there are numerous programs on Indigenous affairs throughout Canada and different provinces, including in Ontario. I was very pleased to see that we're supporting Pikangikum with a water project as well as supporting a school project there. I was formerly in politics and the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. And through that work, I have a lot of contact with Indigenous communities across the province. So I was really excited to see that. There are also programs in preventive health, food security, and empowering women through microfinance opportunities and gender-based violence prevention opportunities. It's important to talk about areas where we didn't succeed, and we did make an application for C19 on a program that we were hoping to put together, which the fund spent a lot of time on the application. We didn't succeed in that, but we did, however, succeed in getting the extension on the mother care project. So that's very good. There are a lot of resources on the website. The website itself is very, very comprehensive. I won't be spending time today going through that, and I do hope that each of you or as many of your parish representatives will be with me on, I believe we're looking at January 21st from 10 to 12 o'clock. There are 4 time frames that are available for this Zoom meeting. So if you haven't already participated in that doodle poll to choose the time for this presentation, I hope that you will do so. I am planning to reach out to all of the parishes if you're not able to attend that meeting anyway over time. But because we're really trying to hit the ground running and get things going quite quickly, because we've missed a little bit of time, the diocese has not had a representative for a while. I really would like to gather as much information so that I can then report back to you, and we can have an opportunity to look at some projects that we might be able to work on together. So that's basically it for me at the moment. I will be happy to take any questions if you have them now. And if you think about something in the future, you can reach me at pwrdf@ontario.anglican.ca. The other thing, last thing to mention before we go to questions, is that there are a lot of pamphlets available for your parishes. There are 100 copies of each type of pamphlet. And Alec, I did send you a link to those resources that can be ordered by the parishes directly through the PWRDF, or you can certainly send me an email and I will help make sure that you get what you've ordered. So without any further ado, now that we have the musical interlude, I would be happy to take any questions.
Very good. Thanks, Sophie. If anybody has any questions for Sophie right now?
Sophie, you can post the link in the chat for the call, so people can access it from there. So if you go into the chat bubble, you can copy the link into there.
Okay.
And then people can get at it.
Now you're expecting me to get out of this window and copy it and get back in, but since I finished my presentation, I can do it on my own time before I sign out altogether. Sure. Okay.
Thank you very much, Sophie, and again to that pwrdf@ontario.anglican.ca address is up and active if anybody wants to reach out that way as well. Very good. Thanks, and we'll flip it back over to Alec and carry on with the agenda.
Thank you, Bishop. We'll again ask people, if you're not speaking, if you go on mute. For those that are on the phone, by the way, we mentioned this early on in one meeting, but I'll mention it again. You can mute yourself if you're dialed in on a phone with star or asterisk 6. You can toggle the mute on and off if you're on the phone. Many of you will find that I have muted you because we get noise but you can unmute yourself by going star 6 and remute star 6. Okay, let me get back onto the presentation package. And we'll cover the financial bits first. So as far as SUS goes, most churches have their SUS data into us. Thank you. The deadline is tomorrow, and we will be submitting the data on Monday. And it does take us a little bit of work in between. So if the church doesn't have the data in, then they're not included in either the revenue reduction or the eligible payroll. So there's no subsidy generated for that church, and therefore no subsidy paid to that church. We've got the bulk of them in, and right now it looks like we had a pretty good December out there. You folks have obviously on the stewardship side kept people focused. The reduction was about 7%. So that the good news there is, of course, that the income is not down as much. Of course, that will generate a lower subsidy. So that's the other side, but given the percentages, far better. Good news there. As I mentioned, each month is the 15th of the month is the deadline. You will find shortly the January form will go up on the website, and that will be due on February the 15th. The one thing that we're working through to try and provide granularity, particularly if Revenue Canada comes back and audits us, is we're asking for 2021 if each church can report rather than in some. We have a couple of cases where parishes are consolidating and reporting, and that was how we approached it. Said that was okay. For 2021, we want to actually have each church go, and so most of you Laura has been working with, but if you have any questions, you can either contact Laura or myself. The government has announced that SUS will continue through June of this year. A couple of you have asked about what's going to happen after March, because you're now comparing the reduced month of March 2020. So they have not made that clear yet. In other cases, they've given you several options. We've always obviously taken the one that are most to our advantage, but we're not clear yet on how in March they will look to start comparing, calculate the reduction. So as soon as we're aware of that from what the government puts out, we also track with our legal advisor and our financial advisor. We will let you know. And the other is, of course, that with the rates, it is now 0.8, the percentage of reduction, it will be 0.8 of your payroll. So we will we'll now work our way through there, but it has definitely decreased in terms of the size of the subsidy. The other one that we've had discussion around, the pandemic financial support response team, I guess I got an extra one in there, we'll be meeting after we have the data in next week. We'll be doing some analysis on that data, and then the PFRT will be meeting the end of next week to provide recommendations to Synod Council. And the focus of this is looking at the churches that are the most impacted and those that are heavily impacted that have more limited internal financial resources to sustain, and then also looking at outreach and ministry in terms of what is being sustained. So that work will run next week, and then Synod Council meets the end of the month. And the plan is to take recommendations to Synod Council for providing relief for those churches that meet those criteria. And more will follow on that after the PFRT meets. But the base of that funding will be the funding that was received for diocesan staff, for the bishop, for Wayne Varley, for myself, and for the diocesan staff. That money has been held in a restricted fund, so it will carry over the end of last year. And already some of that money has been utilized to pay for the insurance interest freeze that we did when this started, for the tech grants, and for the starter kits that were done when buildings reopened in September. So that'll be the source of funding where ongoing is committed there. So more to follow on that once Synod Council, once the PFRT meets, and then Synod Council follows through on the recommendations. So at this point, I will turn over now to Archdeacon Wayne Varley, who's going to give us an update. As Wayne's been working through with the Bereavement Authority. And so Wayne, we'll jump over to you, please.
Thank you, Alec. Friends, it's good being with you in the new year. A few days ago, we had a request for our graveside service in one of our diocesan cemeteries that routinely closes for the winter months. And yesterday I participated in a Bereavement Authority of Ontario webinar. And so I just want to update you in this regard to those of you who have responsibility for cemeteries in your parishes. First off, the routine closure of cemeteries is being discouraged in the province of Ontario, and all cemeteries have been directed to continue burials as long as cemetery committees determine that ground conditions remain safe to do so. There are a variety of reasons for this strategy, a few of which include maintaining the dignity and respect of those who have died and their families, relieving the burden on healthcare, reducing the chance for mistakes in identification, and to avoid the mass storage in alternative facilities. Having said that, there are reasons why cemetery committees may choose to close at this time of year, and it is in your discretion to do so. The reasons may include the ground is frozen, your cemetery is in an area of high water table, there may be no lane or roadway and the cemetery is otherwise inaccessible, or you lack staff, volunteers, and the necessary equipment. So friends, my advice and our advice to you is if you can accommodate burials even in winter months, please consider doing so. If there are reasons why your cemetery ought remain closed in the winter, apart from a routine practice, please do that as well. We're walking a bit of a fine line in partnership with others. We want to meet the pastoral needs of people as best we can, but we need to do it so long as the grounds of our cemeteries will safely allow us to do that. I'll be available later for any questions in this regard, or please feel free to contact me at other time if you have questions in respect of your particular cemetery. Thank you, friends. Alec, back to you.
Thanks, Wayne. So covering now, we are, of course, back in the red stage. We moved back to the red stage on Christmas Eve at midnight. And at that point, just logistically, all the permissions that had been granted when we moved from the red stage previously to amber were then suspended. And so that's where we sit now. A couple of folks have asked some questions around that. And then, of course, further to that, as of midnight last night, the province implemented a shutdown that's expected to last until February the 11th for 28 days. And I think it's also reasonable that, that's the target. But as we all know, things continue to change and evolve, hopefully for the better, but we should continue to plan that we need to be flexible and ready moving forward. I think, though, if you listen to what the politicians are saying and our government, if you listen to what the health experts and the medical people are saying, the message is actually quite simple, and that's as much as you can and where at all possible, stay home. Stay at home. That protects yourself because you're not being exposed, and it protects others because others aren't being exposed to you. And so if you just take the fundamental principle of the phase we're in, the message is 3 words: stay at home. So building with that, all our buildings continue to be closed for all purposes, with a couple of exceptions. The first is around recording online worship. We've had a number of questions in this area. The first is that, is it considered essential? Let's not have that debate, depending upon outside this forum. When you get under the general space, that might create some interesting conversations. But where it's possible, we're encouraging churches to record their worship from home. And, that may be in some cases where there is simply the priest or the incumbent, and they can do so from home. In other cases, you could use something like GoToMeeting or Zoom or platforms like that where you can have multiple streams. It actually means you can have as many people as you want involved. It means masks are not required because you're at home and with yourself or someone else in your bubble. But basically, the church is open for up to 5 people, and we'll cover that in a moment. Hall use and rentals are suspended. The exception there is ministries that are essential services to those who are at risk for either food or shelter. So basically, in our diocese, that's feeding programs and a couple of warming center programs. So all other rentals and all other activities are suspended. For those food programs, of course, they're based upon a takeout model only, and again, subject to the proper precautions. And that means there needs to be social distancing. It means trying to avoid people lining up or that are not distant, avoid people congregating. And the advice we're providing is check with your local health unit on the specifics or concerns they may have, because you want to make sure that you're going to be compliant with what will be enforced in that area. And it is difficult. Sometimes the people that we minister to are not necessarily focused on things like social distancing. That's not necessarily where their mindset is at a given moment. But trying to have adequate supervision, trying to take all the steps possible. But those are the permitted uses of church facility. All else is suspended. The other thing that is required, and again, I will remind you of the discussions we had 10 months ago, which is that you need to continue to check your church buildings. The insurance company requires that you regularly check or inspect the building, and where maintenance is required or preventative maintenance, it is permissible for the church to be entered for those purposes. As far as online worship goes, it really is the clerical and lay leadership determining what is the best way to minister to their congregation. And again, the diocese encourages recording from home, back to the theme of stay home. For in-building sessions, no more than 5 people in the building at any one time. And that includes, the person that's running the AV, That includes anyone else that is in the building, 5 people. Remaining socially distanced, 6 feet. Singers are required to be at least 12 feet. And again, at least, even more is better. What we are hearing is that, they went from confirming that this virus does transmit by aerosols, which is again transmitted by forced exhalation. That this new virus, the new variant of the virus, which originated in the southeast UK, is even more so dangerous that way. So again, maintaining at least 12 feet, preferably more. Everyone must wear masks at all times. You may, and this again for clarification, because there is no congregation, you are allowed multiple singers. So you could have, for example, 4 singers for a soprano, alto, tenor, bass, along with the person that's leading the service. And as long as there's no other readers or AV people or an organist or whatever, that's fine, but no more than 5. And then, of course, anywhere in the areas that are used must be cleaned and disinfected after the session is recorded. One thing that I didn't add here, but is, of course, difficult, but there is no rehearsals. So, obviously continuing with no choir rehearsals, but even musicians, etc., not practicing in building. From a liturgical point of view, wedding and baptisms to be postponed until we exit this phase, except where there is an emergency. And in those cases where a postponement is not possible or it would cause a real pastoral crisis, then the priest in charge or incumbent can seek permission from the bishop. And then Wayne covered funerals already, but again, funerals inside the church are not permitted at this time. The clergy may officiate at a funeral in a funeral home or at a graveside, subject to the BAO guidelines, restrictions, and protocols. From a pastoral care point of view, pastoral care where all possible should be done by remote means, so by phone, by video calls. Again, avoiding in-person meetings. Emergency visitation to a long-term care or hospital is, of course, governed by that institution. In many cases, that's not being permitted at this time. Pastoral care where someone is COVID positive or is quarantined or self-isolating, not permitted. And the exception being, again, if someone is at the end of their life, a Eucharist with that person or anointing, again, following the protocols tightly is permitted. But again, that's for emergency situations. The other area that we've talked a great deal about is around vestry meetings. And of course, this shifted with the shutdown because the conversation was how do you do a vestry meeting with the amber restrictions? And now it's, well, for the next 4 weeks, how do you do them with the red restrictions? And then on the other side of that. So I'll give you some of the basics here. Canon 13 covers vestries and annual general meetings of the vestry. That is both canonic from the Anglican Church. It is also legal in terms of the fact that the province and the government of Canada govern how corporations and charities, not-for-profits, have to be governed in order to have transparency and openness and to ensure that there's good governance where people are giving their money. So all of those things must be factored in. And of course, not only is an annual meeting part of our governance in our churches, it also, though, has a missional element because there's usually discussion around the mission of the church and the mission, what's going on, what can happen, what should happen, and the gathering of the community in that forum. So all of those are pieces that the vestry meeting fulfills within our organizations. It really is like a shareholders meeting. And this is now, I put my governance hat on. The things that are defined that must be covered in an annual meeting are approving the meeting minutes from the prior year, for the incumbent or priest in charge to give a report on the state of the church, the state of the church's mission, and their ministry, for approval of the prior year's financial statements that have been either audited or reviewed, for approval of the next year's budget. So in this case, the 2021, that's one of the key roles of vestry, is approving the budget. The appointment or election of wardens, or a warden, in some cases two, lay delegates for synod, and any other key officers' positions, treasurer, etc. They are either elected, appointed, or confirmed at annual meetings. And then finally is report to the organization for information for all the different groups in the church, the ACW, the choir, the altar guild, the various and sundry programs and mission groups, property related things. All of those come forward with information as well. The canons require that the annual meeting is held by March the 15th. And most churches, the last week or so of January through the month of February and the first week or two of March is typically when annual meetings happen. Of course, COVID impacts on our ability to meet, either when we were in the amber stage by limiting, or in the red stage by preventing in-person meetings. But we're still required to meet the key objectives and functions of the annual vestry meeting. So there are three options which exist for holding your meeting. The first is, if the situation permits, you can have an in-person meeting. If we went back to the amber stage, and if you had enough capacity in your church or hall for the number of people that would be entitled to and would typically attend a vestry meeting. So, for example, if your church or hall can hold 40 based upon capacity of the COVID guidelines, and you had 25 typically showed up at your annual meeting, then I think you're in good shape to have that in person. If, however, your capacity is 50 and you expect there's normally 70 or 80, an in-person pure meeting would not be possible. The second one would be an online meeting using a platform like this. We'll talk about that. And then the third would be a hybrid meeting. So having some people in the room and some people online. So as you look at the situation and as this evolves after Feb the 11th, wardens and the incumbent or the priest in charge need to really look and discern what's the right option for our church, what's the right option for the realities of our church. Regardless of which option you select, and some of the practicalities change, but the requirements for quorum, which is 25% of those on your vestry list, and the requirement that there's at least 2 weeks, 2 Sundays of notice in advance of the meeting, those requirements still exist. Just a couple of quick things on this. There's more detail to be available, but the protocols remain in place for in-person meetings. So distancing, masks, self-assessing, hand sanitization, all of those things would come to play. The capacity limits we talked about, and again, 1 hour is the maximum you want people in a space. And so that most churches would have a service and then go, many cases, to a lunch and then go to the annual meeting. So for example, That may mean that the 10:30 service, by the time you're done the service and you leave the hall, it's 2:30, 3 o'clock. Well, that's not permissible in this space. It needs to all come down either to being separate from a Sunday service or combining the liturgy and the bare bones annual meeting. And we'll talk a little more about that. The worship committee has put some things together to help there. For an online meeting, again, the incumbent and the wardens would need to choose the right platform. So Zoom, GoToMeeting, there's many out there, and also to ensure that the right equipment is available. That's things like audio equipment, microphones, speakers, displays, that type of thing. It must allow for people to participate by phone. I mean, on this call, there's about, I think, a dozen people or so of the 102 that are dialed in via telephone. So again, for those that either don't have access to internet or decent internet, those that are uncomfortable with smart devices or PCs, you need to allow for a phone connection so they can participate seamlessly with those that are in on multimedia. Documents need to be sent out and available ahead of time so that everyone has them and they're ubiquitously available. You need to work through the ground rules for the discussion. How do you ask people to put their hand up? How you handle those things, how you handle voting, because again, the number of ways to deal with that. It's recommended to have a point person or a coordinator that works all of that, kind of acts as the director too, as these things go on the line through. And then the other thing here, the guidance is rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. Is to make sure they flow well, that you will need to actually practice, to take the people leading the meeting, walk through the agenda, ensure that the equipment works, the microphones, have somebody out remotely in the meeting, ensure they can hear, practice the handoff from the warden to the treasurer to the incumbent, rehearse it to make sure that it goes well, you make best use of the time, and that it avoids as much confusion for people as possible. The final option, and again, this assumes that we are out of the red stage, that is hybrid. So that takes both. And that would be reflective where, for example, the crowd is larger. The vestry meeting would have more people than you can handle in the room. It would require, or where there are cases where some of your people are uncomfortable, either unable to physically or uncomfortable coming to a live meeting. So there's all of those cases that allows people to attend in the room, as well as having people online. And that really requires you to do both. So the in-person as well as the online, that you need to follow the guidelines for both. So there's a seamless experience. Everybody has the same opportunity to see, hear, and speak, whether they're physically in the room or they're on the phone or they're on a PC or smart device. And once again, at this point, if your meeting is scheduled before February 11th and you want to go forward, you don't have a choice. It would have to be an online meeting. In-person and hybrid meetings are not possible while we are still in the red stage. So there'll be a much more detailed document. That document has been written and reviewed. It's just awaiting final approval from the chancellor. I expect that any time now. And that will come out to you hopefully in the next day or two. The worship committee has put together a liturgy, put together some resources to help where you're trying to combine the annual service with worship and do that in an expeditious way. There are also good resources in general for prayers and things, even if you're doing your Vestry meeting separately. Mark Hauser is available for technology consulting. So if you're struggling with what platform or, what equipment would we need or how would we do this, Mark and myself are both available to help you with that. If there are special circumstances and you can't make March the 15th, you can apply, and we would review that, and ultimately the bishop would make a decision on approving that. However, our goal is still to have the annual meetings happen. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is to live up to the canons and to live up the standard that's set in the legislation, even though they do give you some variance in times of a state of emergency. But the other thing really is that you don't want to be having your annual meeting in June. You want to do the work now. You want to review 2020, review the financials, approve your budget, and elect your wardens or appoint your other officials, get your lay delegates in place. And you want to do that now and be able to move on from 2020, have your congregation up to date. So I can tell you that one of the requirements if dispensation was offered, you would still need to publish all of the reports, the financial statements, the reports, the slate of proposed officers, et cetera, et cetera. So all of the work still needs to be done. If at all possible, we're going to encourage you to get this done before the middle of March. And of course, the one thing that doesn't change, the incumbent is responsible for getting the parish information sheet and the lay delegates back to the diocesan office. Part of that being, we get people who say, I never got invited to. If we don't have current information, then we don't know who to invite. We don't know who to communicate with, and that's always an issue. So the incumbent is responsible for ensuring that that data comes back in. So just kind of pulling this section to a conclusion, I think the good news is whether we're talking about going back to purely online, and we are talking about purely online worship, whether we're talking about parish meetings happening, annual meetings happening online, the good news here is that you have all gathered a lot of experience, you have developed skills, you've put tools in place and technology in place to be able to do these things. So, the shutdown is obviously disappointing. It's frustrating. It's difficult for everybody, but I think there is a much better preparedness. And with it, even though nobody's going to say, yay, I love being online, I think there is a higher level of comfort, certainly than there was last March when we began. There's also been a lot of development of pastoral care and ministry and financial stewardship mindsets, practices, and tools, resources through what we've done. And we continue to now, and you all to continue to develop and harvest the benefits of that. Of course, let's not forget that vaccines have started to roll out. And, we're talking in this province, April, May, June, will start to hit more of the general population. And by September, the Prime Minister's goal is that anyone who wants the vaccine has it. So by that point, we're able to build our way through and start to return, hopefully later in the year, to the green stage. Finally, just to say, the guiding principle in the red stage, stay home. So we are going to have some sessions coming up that will be focused in a few areas. I'll look for input during Q&A. More than happy to have, once the document comes out, more than happy to have a special call or a meeting regarding vestry meetings. If there's questions, concerns, if people are looking for guidance and advice, more than happy to be able to do a special meeting on that. We will be having a meeting in February on insurance. We will be, as we've talked, you being able to send us payments electronically rather than me trying to touch this quickly in one of these calls. We'll do that in a special session. And then finally, we are trying to simplify green sheets this year. So later on, we'll be looking to take input and also to work our way through how to simplify green sheets. And with that, we will turn, the bishop and Wayne and I are available for questions. As I mentioned, those that are on the phone, if you wish to ask a question, *6 mute you or unmute you. Please go back on mute after. For those that are on audio, you are on video, you can come off mute and ask. Please mute after. You can also use the chat line, and Laura will do her usual wonderful job of moderating the chat. So with that, let's open up for questions.
Alex, it's Donna Robinson.
Hi, Donna.
Good afternoon. I have a question for the bishop, if I might, and then a follow-up for Wayne Varley.
Go ahead.
Hey, so my question is about St. Luke's Leeds thrift shop in Elgin, as you know. I understand that our buildings are closed, Bishop, and I completely concur with that. However, I do have a concern about the occasional urgent and emergency delivery we are asked to make. This fall, particularly, we've had an inordinate amount of house fires with fire victims, people requiring clothing on an emergency basis. And what I'm wondering about is my position if I go to the thrift shop and deliver from it in those situations.
That's a good question. I think when we're talking about the shops and things like that being closed, it's just for the usual walk-in business. I think again in those emergency situations that you're delineating, in my mind, just off the top of my head, and I get Wayne and Alec to weigh in on it as well. But top of my head, that's very similar to our food programs for the vulnerable sector, and why those are continuing on with certain requirements in place. So again, I think if you go in and you get stuff to deliver to somebody who has been, and I've heard of some of those terrible situations that have happened recently with the fires, and there's appeals going out for furniture and for clothes and for things like that. I think there's the opportunity to do that. My feeling is that you go in, you do it, make sure that if you have, 1 or 2 people helping, you have up to a maximum of 5, and maintaining the distance, doing things like that. It is an emergency situation, an emergency basis, and I think that would be fine to go ahead with that. The other thing that I forgot to mention in my remarks, and I don't know, Alec, I was listening, but I don't know if that was covered when you were speaking, is that if something comes up, you may be able to receive either incumbent stating that you are performing work on behalf of the parish in an urgent and essential situation, so that if you were, I don't know if that would happen, if you were stopped or hauled over or whatever, and it's the same thing goes for those who are traveling, again, having to do online worship in the church because advanced equipment that you have mean that you have to do that. I can also provide a letter over my signature that you'd be able to say that you are working, doing essential service, and are required to be out. That's in dealing with the stay-at-home order and the possibility of fines for that. So, Wayne, I'll throw it over to you. Do you have anything further to add to that?
No, Bishop, that's consistent with our approach throughout, trying to meet the essential needs of folk and do it safely and well as best we can.
Yeah, and prayers certainly go out to those people. There are 2 fires in particular recently that have been quite devastating and just sad beyond belief.
Could I have, Bishop, a letter? I expect to be getting a call next week to make deliveries. We only do 1 person for deliveries because of having additional people in the car. We don't do that. We just have the 1 person, but a letter would be helpful if I could have one.
That'd be great. Happy to do it. I think in that case too, you can also get a letter from your incumbent. And I think for those kind of internal parish matters, the letter that I had been proposing were for clergy, doing the services. So they could get a letter, so they have some kind of authorization for what they're doing. But I think at the cathedral, for example, a letter's been prepared for the people doing Lunch by George so that they can carry on their business and they've got something there. So I'm happy to do it, but if the incumbents there in Leeds want to take it on and do the letter up, I think that would be perfectly fine. It's someone in authority giving you that document that you can have. Just makes assurance doubly assured.
Thank you, Bishop. I see the incumbent scribbling, so I know it'll be coming.
I'm happy to do that, Donna. I just wasn't sure if you wanted that to come from your office, Bishop, but I'm happy to do that.
I think.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying anything around those internal parish matters, like for example, Lunch by George, the letter from my office would go for the clergy because you can't provide your own authorization. So you would have that letter from my office over my signature.
Sounds good. My question was in the guidelines that are coming out regarding annual vestry meetings, is that specifically addressing how we might go about creating a vestry list in this time when all the norms that normally went into creating our vestry list are a bit meaningless?
Well, of course, according to the canons, the incumbent always has a current vestry list, right?
The incumbent has a vestry list that's based on the attendance at worship and participation in the Eucharist, and it has in our parishes regularly been updated, but the pandemic makes that how you would use apply the metrics different there. And I wonder, like, is there going to be advice? Do we just use last year's and graciously invite people who are participating in online worship to be part of it? Is that going to be addressed, just so that we have something formalized around that?
So the canon itself, I think, still applies. I'll speak with the chancellor, but the point being that if you are over the age of 16 or older, if you're an adherent to the Anglican Church of Canada, if you are identified that is you're a member of this church, you're not voting in another vestry, and you've attended, so all of those things, I think, still apply. The issue is now how many times you've attended, and I think, Nancy, that's where there needs to be a little bit of flexibility, where it's not easy. But when someone is easily identified as a member of that church, I don't think that there needs to be a lot of conversation. Taking the most current list you have and updating it as required, and even asking folks online, to identify if they are new or weren't at last year's meeting, could they identify themselves by email or whatever? Those are all ways to make sure you have as good a vestry list as you can get in this environment. Past that, I think we need to be a little more flexible and a little more open as we try and work through this time. And normally vestry membership issues only come up when there's something controversial at the vestry to be voted on.
Yes, Alex, it's the other Wayne here. Yeah, I just wanted to make a point that for our annual meetings, that is usually open to all members of each individual church to attend. The only way I could see that happening would be in an online manner, which could get a little complicated, but I don't see how we could do it otherwise.
Yeah, that is, I mean, one of the things, there are times where people that are not eligible members of the vestry will attend a vestry meeting. And of course, in the normal mode, you would not either ask or expect that person to raise their hand or to vote, or you wouldn't count it. That is a little more difficult in an online setting. And that would, if you have that situation, though, there are ways in some of the tools like polling, etc., to be able to actually do so. I mean, the other reality is that sometimes it matters more than others. You know, when you're approving the minutes and if you ask all in favor and the answer is, and then all against, and there's no one, then I think you're safe. It's when you start parsecting into pieces beyond that. But you would, if you're going to be open to people that are not eligible members, there's going to be, and we can talk about that, how there's different ways to do it. None of them are ideal.
Hi, Alex. It's Fran Smith here from Charlotte Lake. One of the things we do in our council meetings with Zoom meetings is when it comes to the vote, we ask the question, who is voting no? And then if we don't hear any no's, then we assume that the motion is carried. And we give ample time for people to say yes or no.
Like that, and that too is a good, particularly on not routine things, but things that are clear. That's a great way because right? And that's, in fact, cuts the time and provides clarity. If you're against, then speak now.
Alex, I'm a bit confused as usual. It's Liz from Christchurch in Gananoque. Would the recording secretary not keep track of all of this? I mean, presumably they keep the minutes of the meeting, and can they not create a list of attendees, either whether they're online or whether they're in person? For them to create that list should not be very difficult.
And that is part of, in fact, that's one of the requirements for an online meeting is that there is, the list is kept and how they were, and that's in the guidelines. The issue I think we're more talking isn't about, it's about when you come to voting, unless you go person by person, you know, if there are people attending who are there but are not eligible to vote because they're not members of that vestry. And that does happen. Wayne mentioned, you know, that people from the other churches in the parish are encouraged or invited to attend other vestry meetings. Those people are welcome to attend, but would not be eligible to vote.
I see. Yeah, well, I'm sure we probably don't need to worry about that. Nobody wants to go to more than one vestry meeting these days.
Unless there's a controversial matter, most times there's not people sort of knocking the door down to get into vestry, but again, each church is unique, and I think that's what, when we talk about each church, the wardens and incumbent need to kind of work through what's the right way for them.
Actually, Wayne here again. Actually, what I was referring to, Alex, was not members from our other churches, but members of our church, individual church, who do not normally attend vestry meetings, but are active members of our church. And they are always encouraged and invited to come to the annual meeting, and they are allowed to speak, not necessarily vote, but if they have questions about what we're doing and why we're doing it, that is their opportunity to, find out what's going on in their church and have a better understanding.
And the issue for that to continue, that where you only come into the issue is where once there's a vote, how do you make sure that person doesn't get doesn't vote?
Well, we know who the voting members are, and we keep them separate, So that's not normally a problem.
And if you're doing so, it just becomes an issue online. And again, we can talk about this in individually or separately, but that's a detail that depends on your local situation.
Alex, could I ask my question to Wayne if he's still there, please?
Please do.
Wayne, when you had the webinar with the BAO last week, did they mention anything about the 2020 reports to go to the BAO? Normally they send out the form in November, but I haven't seen anything at all yet for the cemeteries.
There was, Donna, there was a brief reference to the reports being sent, although no timeline was mentioned. The most recent meeting I was a part of was mainly about cemeteries and those matters around burials. So you should receive it soon if you have not already.
Nothing has come in yet, so
Okay.
if I don't receive one by the end of the month, I think I better check.
I would suggest, yeah, if you have not received by the end of January or the first part of February, then we can proceed. You can proceed with follow-up.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Donna.
And there was conversation, I'll have to check the detail, Donna, but there was conversation that the BAO was going to no longer send the forms out, that you would download them. So I don't know whether that got implemented for 2021 or not.
Alec, it was the goal to do it for 2021, but there was talk of some delay, to be especially careful during COVID. But that was all the information that I'd received.
Their website should update. We can check the website.
Yeah, Donna, that would be the thing. Go to the BAO website. They update it almost daily.
Yeah, I will. I just thought you'd be an easy way in case they mentioned it.
I try to be, and sometimes am, but usually am not.
I know the feeling. Thanks.
Alex, when it comes to holding a Zoom meeting or a WebEx meeting, would the diocese do that for us, and in order to set up our vestry meetings? Those programs do cost money, and our churches just don't. They're not. We don't have those applications. But if, say, Bill Clark could set it up for us, they could turn it over to us to be the moderator and stay in the meeting or not stay in the meeting.
So we do at the diocese, we have we subscribe to a number of platforms. So, you know, if the cost is an issue for a parish, then let Mark or I know.
Okay, thank you.
Alec,
Sorry, go ahead.
Wayne again. I was just wondering if you had any timeline on a follow-up meeting with our parish?
I sent you guys out an email. I'm looking at next week.
Oh, okay. I guess I
Yep.
haven't seen that yet.
Yep, sent that out earlier today.
Okay, thank you.
Laura, have we got questions on the chat line?
Alex, there are many questions in the chat, and a number referring to singers and musicians. But first, can you please clarify whether the diocese is operating from the amber guidelines or the red guidelines at this time?
We are in the red stage. So we are operating on the very simplistic guidelines of the red stage. The key ones which were highlighted in this presentation, but we are in the red stage.
Thank you. There are some questions regarding the distance between singers and musicians for online services. Do you know what these distances should be?
Right. So the guidelines at this point are 12 feet. Again, though, recognizing that singing is a higher risk activity and that people must be masked. But if you can get more than 12 feet, then you should do so. If the people have asked, well, what about a barrier? Then safer yet. But the minimum that has been prescribed by the health side is 12 feet.
Alex, is it just during the red stage that musicians are not allowed to rehearse together in the church building?
So what was reopened in the red stage, there's no rehearsing. In the amber stage, it was okay for a musician to go back in and practice. What was not permitted was choir practices. So groups of people were not permitted, but for example, an organist or a pianist could go back in, and it was also in the amber stage that allowed for teaching situations where, for example, an organist may teach piano or organ, that preferably done in the church.
Can singers claim they need to be out during the current stay-at-home order, which requires being out only for essential needs?
That's an interesting question, right? It probably, you can make that case that because worship is permitted within these very tight guidelines, I would still suggest getting a letter from your incumbent. The other thing that I will mention is that, again, you know, being able to sing at home, being able to sing without a mask, or to have a bunch of singers, we all see things on Facebook and other YouTube and other online places where you can do things online. And so if there is nothing that says that I can't record from home rather than coming into the church. So both of those are options.
I just add that for the singers, in those cases where you can have the up to 5 in the church building because it's essential for you to be there to record because the equipment is there and that's necessary for it, that the incumbent could give the letters to the various participants, and then I would provide the letter for the incumbent.
Alex, is it still recommended that windows be open when services are being recorded in the church building?
So again, and anything you can do to improve ventilation when there's people in the church. So whether that's 5 or 50, still recommended to do so, particularly when there's singers, because again, that exhalation, aerosols, you want to do everything you can to get fresh air coming in and stale air moving out. So yeah, that would still be the recommendation.
Moving on to outdoor services. Are outdoor services allowed? And if so, what are the numbers allowed to attend?
So Bishop, do you want to?
During the lockdown, the outdoor services and lockdown and of course the stay-at-home order, outdoor services wouldn't be permissible at this time. Once we get past the end of the lockdown and find out where we're going in terms of will they be carrying on with, and it's difficult to say right now whether they be carrying on with the gray zone after the stay-at-home order expires, but I think that's until the 10th of February. But right now, we're governed by that, and then we'll see where we're at come the 10th of February around those types of things. We're going back to amber, or whether we're still going to be in gray, and then we'll visit the question at that time around those issues.
Bishop, can you answer how you feel about drive-through services at this time?
I don't think I would recommend. I would say no. Just you know, drive through. I'm trying to I'm just getting the question here and trying to visualize what that would look like. But it just I think if it's a case where, you know, worship carrying on doing the online version that we're able to do. I don't know if this is a situation where there's no contact to the internet or something like that. But I mean, I think we're at a point now. I think the easiest way, I'm trying to visualize what a drive-through service would look like. So I'm not. I know some people have been talking about Ash Wednesday, and I think it's hard to say what's going to happen at this point because I think we'll have to look at these things as we get closer to it. Some people do ashes on the go and different things like that, but we'll have to visualize that. I know Ottawa has addressed the Ash Wednesday issue and made it very clear that this year, and I think that's where I would go to with exactly the same advice. Ashes, like most of the symbols that we use in the life of our worshiping life, symbols help us to focus our worship and devotion. But what's most important is the worship and the devotion, not the actual symbol. And ashes aren't a sacrament. They're not even mentioned in the BCP. They're optional in the BAS. And I think this year, trying to figure out how to do ashes and stay 6 feet away from one another, I don't know. I just it's not necessary, and I would say no at this point. But anyway, let's get closer to those dates.
Bishop, can I address, just because we're talking about outdoor services and drive-through services now, I've attached a link to the Government of Ontario regulation on these kind of issues, just to provide some clarity. And of course, right now, there shouldn't be anything, but for when we do sort of go more into sort of the gray zone, it very clearly lays out what some of those requirements are. And one of those requirements is no exchanging of materials with people in vehicles, like the vehicles have to be sort of closed up. So you wouldn't be able to do the imposition of ashes. You wouldn't be able to hand out communion, and you have to have those distances between vehicles and between vehicles and whoever's leading the services. Anyhow, so there's a link for that regulation in the chat for people's future reference.
Great. Thank you, Trish.
Alex, there's a question regarding the tech grants. Last year, there was discussion of the possibility of expanding the tech grant for equipment beyond just what is needed for online worship to other areas, such as projecting services in-house. Is this still under consideration?
We have, I think one of the previous calls mentioned that we have expanded the guidelines. The focus being not just on the actual technology for online part, but because of the COVID things, you know, we've seen a number of cases where the elimination of paper and hymn books and prayer books to going to projectors. In other cases where the masks have required people to, you know, a better PA system. So we've seen a couple of those, and we've kept that program open and expanded that to generally say, because of the impacts of COVID, how that affects our worship experience, and we've expanded that already.
This is a lengthy question. A requirement of canon law is that financials be audited for the vestry meeting. However, we cannot launch our audit without documents provided by the diocese, December statements of account, year-end statement of investment, holdings, etc. The longer it takes to receive these documents, the less time left to have the audit booked and conducted. When can we expect to have all these documents made available?
So again, those are all pieces that are part of our normal month end and year end. As far as I'm aware, I've not caught otherwise. I know Candace and Joyce and Laura are all on the line, but you know, the monthly statements flow out as per that would be this week. The investment statements normally do not come until the audit. Our audit is has been through them, and that's typically into February. But the balances are there with what you received with your last quarterly payment. We are moving to a system with new statements that we're moving to effective this quarter, but you won't have that till March. But the other point is that I still correct, because the canon refers to either an audit or a review. And so in many cases, it is acceptable for someone who is a knowledgeable financial person and independent from those that have handled the books to review. So we still get questions every year. Do we have to go and pay for an audit? And you are doing an independent audit piece. But the documents that come from the diocese will be available in the normal time frame. And that's this
Alex?
week.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, that's this week.
Do all church supporters receive a copy of the vestry info, or just those who are on the parish list? We have new members who have joined us during COVID who do not meet the guidelines.
So and again, I want to be careful, because we often get, you know, kind of legislative with these things. But if I quote you from the canon, right, that I saw when someone signs into the vestry meeting, they are solemnly declaring that they have been a member of the Anglican Church of Canada, as defined in Canon 1, and that I have regularly attended scheduled services of worship with this congregation for at least 3 months, and have received the sacrament of Holy Communion at least 3 times, and I'm of the age fully of 16, and that I've not voted in another vestry during the previous 3 months, nor do I intend to vote in another vestry during the ensuing year. So where the line is between someone who's been attending, if you've been attending online, that is you've attended scheduled worship. The challenge with the Eucharist, again, we may need to be a little bit flexible this year. So whether someone is a regular member, my argument would be at this point in time, we should be doing all we can to welcome people into our churches. And so, well, you've only received communion twice. While I get the canonic piece of it, if somebody has been attending regularly, if someone is contributing, if someone's now part of the life of that church, excluding them, right, is problematic. So definitely, the information is there to be transparent. The financial statements, the reports, not only are they there for transparency, they're there for people to feel like they belong and for people to feel like they have a stake. Borderline cases on eligibility, then that's the wardens and the incumbent that can make those decisions. But again, I think we need to be cautious that some of the people that are attending online, we don't kind of push them away over dots and T's and details.
Alex, if a church has a food security program running out of their hall, just to clarify, does the incumbent need to give them a letter authorizing the use of the space? And does the bishop need to sign off on this?
So 2 different things there. The incumbent would be giving a letter for them to be traveling that would say, if you're stopped for whatever reason by a bylaw person or an officer of the law, you would then be able to say, I'm legitimate here on a necessary thing. In order for anything to happen in a hall, the wardens must approve, right? The wardens are responsible for the temporal, and the wardens need to approve something happening in the hall. So the wardens would need to approve that. The individuals traveling to come and work in that session, getting a letter from the incumbent would be a good idea. You're traveling to to get to the church, to be able to cook or to be able to distribute food, having a letter from the incumbent would be a good idea.
Alex, there's another question from Julie Daxon regarding singers. Can you explain the difference between the red and amber guidelines distancing for singers? Red is 12 and amber is 15.
Yeah, the difference is 3 feet. This is one of those ones that between points in time, things have adjusted. And at one point in time, we had set 15 feet and we had been over. When you follow the ministry guidelines, it's 12 feet. So one of the things we did was we adjusted along the way. Perhaps we didn't communicate that well enough. I would still recommend 15 feet if you could do it. And I'm a singer myself. Do 20, right? Do 25. The more distance you create, the better off you are. The bare minimum requirement is 12 feet. Doesn't matter what color we are.
Alex, is the diocese set up to receive online payments for CMM? And if so, have you assigned account numbers to the churches?
So we are set up as a payment. So as the same way I pay some of my bills online and I've set them up in my banking. The diocese is set up on the chartered banks and some of the trust companies as a payee. And so you can go in rather than writing a check and set up a payment. And that would also allow you to do it on an ongoing basis. The next step we will offer is that we will be able to, for auto debit, for us to be able to go in like a PAG and auto withdraw that money. That will be an option that we'll create later in the year. But the payment using the diocese as a payee, just like Ontario Hydro, just like anything else that's in there, gas company, etc., it will be there as a payee.
We will need your account number though, or your email address, right?
No, you should be. Well, you can always email. You can always email us money. Joyce is set up to do that. But if you go into the payees section of your bill payment, part of the app, you set up who payees are. That would then have the number. That would have that in there. If there's any questions on the detail, Joyce is available to help you.
Just usually when you set up a bill, you have an account number. I suppose if each church has an account number, then that would work really smoothly.
Yep, and we will, we've got that in place to start now. I don't know if Joyce is still on. Joyce is busy doing payroll and we have audit going on. I don't know if Joyce is on the line now or not.
Yes, I am here. Every church does have a number, and that is on your statement. So it would be 3 and then 4 letters and ends in 1. But you can look on the statement and that's what you would use.
Okay, thank you.
So Wayne Varley left a comment in the chat with a link to the BAO website for anybody with questions regarding funerals and cemeteries. There was a question following that saying that Wayne indicated in the red, there is no practicing in the church allowed. And a short time later, it was indicated no more than 5 in the church. Can you clarify?
Sorry, you broke up for a second on my end, Laura. I heard 5.
Yeah, I missed the question too.
So it said earlier, Wayne indicated in the red, there is no practicing in the church allowed. And then a short time later, it was indicated no more than 5 in the church. Can you clarify what that means?
Are we talking musicians, I think?
It doesn't say. I'm not too sure if that's relating to funerals or musicians. It's from BC Russ. If he's still on the line, would you like to ask the question?
So the guiding principle is still you want as few people for as short a period of time as you can in the church. So is it are you allowed to bring your 5 musicians in and run a choir practice? No, you may not. Individuals rehearsing is fine, right? That one individual coming into but you're not running because what you're doing is raising the risk factor for everyone. We're in the red phase. So that's not, but an individual.
I'm just looking at the question there, and it was I think it's related to practice. I think we're starting to break up a bit on the call. I hope you're getting this, but I think it's related to practice in the church. So musicians practicing, and I think Alec, when you answered that, you said you'd have a pianist or an organist that could go in and do rehearsal before a service. And I think the 5 people relates to when the actual service itself is happening. You can have no more than 5 people in the building with all of the distancing requirements that were in place. And again, that then goes back to that original thing, as if it's not reasonable for for you to be able to stay home to do the recording of the service, and that because of the equipment that you require and the bandwidth you require, it has to be done from the church. Then it becomes a requirement. You have to be there. Incumbent gets the letter from me. Incumbent provides letters to the others who would be participating, and the service is either recorded or live streamed from the church. I think that's what that was relating to, but the practice piece of it, I think, was related to organists and pianists going in individually to do practice prior to a service. I think that's what was talking about.
Alex, it's Peggy Bell from Brockville. Just a quick question to clarify. Can counters still come in and do their counting for the offerings? I mean, it doesn't take long these days, but it's very quick. But can we still come in and do that?
And again, you know, that's part of, just like Joyce is coming in to our office is closed. We're all working from home. Joyce comes in for a couple of hours a week because we have bank deposits to do. The mail has to be still. There's a couple of critical things. So again, that's an essential. We would consider that a necessary because of the financial life. We would consider that necessary. And so having two people with social distancing, et cetera, come in for a minimum amount of time, the answer to that's yes, because that otherwise, how you're not getting your money into the bank.
Thank you.
I have a question. This is Noel speaking.
Hey, Noel.
At St. Albans, we have a monthly drop-in for offertory for those who don't have ETFs or PAG. So it's me and my treasurer, and one person comes in. They drop it in a offertory plate, and then they leave. Would that be okay? It's below the 5 people, but we have folks coming in and out.
Sorry, so how many? Like, somebody would come in the church, drop it in a plate,
and leave.
It's a different situation. You would need to argue that they're permitted to leave their house. There's an interesting question. Is it necessary to leave your house to go and drop your money at the church? There's a discussion there, but I think we want to keep things as minimum as we can.
And actually, the word is it essential?
Yeah. Can I jump into that? I think, you know, let's look at perspective. By the 10th of February, hopefully we'll be out of this and back into the gray zone requirements or into what we were. Perhaps it would be best to encourage people between now and then to hang on to their, because again, is it essential to travel to drop a physical offering in a plate, or can just hang on to that until it's okay to go out? That may be a bit of an issue. We haven't considered that, but that might be a bit of an issue.
Or put a check in the mail.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Yeah, there are various different options and ways of doing this. Thank you.
Alex, there's a comment from Ian Ritchie regarding buildings. As churches are doing their budgeting at this time, it is vital for those working on budgets to be aware of the latest developments in the area of cold weather heat pumps, as church furnaces always break down in the winter. Engineer Ian Kilbourne of Red Squirrel, an energy auditing company in Kingston, will offer his expertise to the diocese on the recent advances that make it possible for churches to save money on heating costs while also cutting CO2 emissions at the same time. Would people want to offer some time to Ian Kilbourne on one of these diocesan conference calls, one for which members of church building committees are invited to attend?
So we'll turn that to the group. Is there interest in? and either on one of these calls or setting up a separate call that people can join on to. I'm seeing some nodding heads. I'm seeing a lot of, I can't tell with a bunch of initials, but it sounds like, Ian, there is a level of interest.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, there's one last question. Well, I guess there's a couple more questions, sorry. First of all, if Julie Daxon is still on the line, I would like to invite her to ask her questions regarding the singers and musicians. I'm not sure I'm asking the questions the way she is hoping they'd be relayed.
Yes, I'm here. My question is that the amber guidelines are stricter, or sorry, the red guidelines are stricter than the amber guidelines. Red guidelines say 12 feet between musicians and singer. Amber guidelines say 15. So that's my confusion. If we are in the red, we are told to use 12, but amber has stricter guidelines. So I'm wondering if the reds guidelines need to be updated to 15 or if we should be using 15.
So again, we adjusted down to 12, and there's a number of adjustments that have happened between red before and what we're doing now. But so the first thing is we set the minimum. As I said earlier, if it was me, I'd prefer 20 feet to 12 feet. So we set the minimum. We don't set the maximum. So if the guideline, the best practice is as much room as you can. We've adjusted the guidelines as we went, and we will, in all likelihood, update amber when we re-enter it. We'll update it to 12. But
because you did just update amber November 27th to 15. So that's why I'm confused.
Well, if that's the major issue you've got, then I think we're in good shape. I'd suggest if you want to maintain 15, I think if that's your concern, then I'd say maintain 15.
Thank you.
Alex, the last question in the chat. Do the counters and office staff have to follow the red guidelines where they do not touch the mail for 3 days?
And again, what you're trying to do is, again, make sure that you either sanitize. So one of the options you do have, much like some people do with their groceries, is wiping groceries down. So the idea of the 3 days is that the virus life on paper is typically shorter than that. So you have the option of sanitizing envelopes, etc. But again, what you should be doing is leaving and safely storing that for those 3 days so someone doesn't handle it. But wiping it down is an option. Is that it, Laura?
That is everything in the chat.
We've gone a little longer today, but we had a lot of content today. A lot of questions that come out of that content. So we will schedule another call in 2 weeks' time. I just received an email. The Chancellor has approved the document. So we will get that document out to you tomorrow on Vestry Meetings. And along with the Worship Committee's resources on building into that. So Bishop, can we turn back to you, please, for...
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for your questions and your diligence on the call today. I think we set a record on the numbers on the call today. We're up to 102 on this call. So thank you very much, everybody, for being part of it. Stay safe over these days, and we will persevere together through them. You're very much in my prayers over this time. So we will close with the grace. With the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen. Blessings, everyone. Take care and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Have a good day, everyone, from Barb and George.
Bye.